Hello and welcome to our Gridly webinar. Hello to you all. Thank you for your attendance. See if a few more people start dropping in and we shall then make a start. Okie dokie. Right. Anybody else? Any more? Okay. Right, I shall crack on. Hopefully everyone can hear me properly. Okay, so our webinar is on building an agile localization workflow for Unity projects. Now we're going to keep it light on the paperwork and kind of get into actually kind of showing you some stuff and get it all working. I'm sure that, we are recording this and this will be available afterwards if you'd like to review any of the stuff on here. But of course, at the end, we'll then provide you with some contact details so you can get in touch with us if need be to further enhance any of the things that we've discussed today. Okay, so we have me and we have Norbert, and again, there's lots of detail here. Development background from my side, and also very much a case from Norbert as well, who joined us reasonably recently from MemoQ, and so has a whole kind of gamut of experience from that side of things as well. So basically we should be able to cover a fair amount of the stuff. If you do have any queries and you'd like to kind of place them in the chat, then feel free to do so. I think that's enabled. And then we've got some other guys that are kind of hanging about as well, and they might be able to answer some of the questions you may well have. But of course, there'll be a Q&A at the end, as you would expect. Okay, so the whole kind of agile content workflow, I mean, this certainly does apply to a great deal of development projects, but we wanted to particularly kind of interface with Unity for this talk, just to kind of talk to to you guys that may perhaps be working with Unity and want to kind of understand how to then kind of make a lot of these problems that we find ourselves in go away. So the whole kind of agile content is continually added strings throughout development, especially if you get to the end of the project and then you're still working on DLC or updates, and constant updates, potentially kind of one a week or more. So those source strings are just under constant flux, and that could well be a case of additional content, or it could be QA stuff that's happening at QA or during design phase as well. So we've got the localization team are then tasked to then turn these texts around in the best quality possible, of course, and these things just continually kind of overlap many times. It's very rare you get to the point where you just go, right, that's the game finished, let's go and translate it now. That's a super rare thing, especially in today's world. So basically there's drawbacks. So, stuff being overwritten, maybe not being tracked properly. And then there's kind of syncing those diffs between the two as well. So you need to have that kind of workflow able to deal with that. Now I'm very quickly going to look at this chat because it could well be. Okay, thank you very much, Vaslav. Right, you said I can't hear you. Right, so localization issues with Unity-based projects specifically. So a lot of the time, it could well be a case of you've got the dev team working Unity, but then providing access to Unity is obviously, kind of not always doable, of course, and certainly there's no kind of interface there to allow that kind of that translation pass to happen in a good way. And then there's the potential for importing and exporting files, or indeed using like a Google Sheet to then manage that text as well. But again, with Google Sheets, then there's access control issues, there's versioning as well. So there's things that are a big kind of challenge on that side of things, which we do believe that we've resolved with Gridly, and certainly that the teams that are using Gridly at the moment with Unity. So Gridly, I'm sure you had a chance to have a look at our website and stuff. But basically, it's about kind of centralizing and working on your content, in a single environment workspace, and a true kind of collaboration, unlimited flexibility, and just allowing that kind of that really specific control. And that's the really important thing. It's kind of like we want it to make it friendly looking, so it's in a spreadsheet kind of in a spreadsheet view. So that's great, and so it should be instantly recognizable. But you want to have all that ability then communicate externally with all kinds of different eventual kind of repositories, etc., that you want to then communicate all this data with. And one of those just happens to be Unity as well, of course. So if I continue down, so we're going to go through managing strings with Gridly, and then go into our Unity plugin as well with Norbert, who will kind of take us through some of those parts as well. And then we'll finish up with a Q&A. Right, okay, so if I just change my view here to this Unity grid here. So if I just pop out of here, this is just a, so the buttons are really nice and big because I want to make sure that everyone can see the content on the screen. But of course, it doesn't need to be this big when it's on your screen. You can certainly change the size. So we've got we've got this database here, and within the database, you can have any number of grids within that. Usually the grids will be defined by the content being wildly different from one grid to another, if that's what you're kind of looking after. You could be creating a grid that's overlaying text on screenshots, for example, and you can want to house that all within Gridly and have that tracked through the localization process. So that might sit totally kind of separately to your kind of main in-game stuff, or you might be running other processes using our Lambda scripts, etc. So there's kind of lots and lots of different types of grids might be needed. But in this one here, this is just a very, very simple, very, very basic Unity one, just to kind of really show you in a very kind of limited way, the way that this kind of chat can go backwards and forwards. So basically we've got a simple path here. Again, we can kind of expand on this. We've got, we can deliver these paths into Gridly from Unity. And so we have that detail here, record ID, then the source text, and then the screenshot's been generated. Now this we generated before because we wanted to very much kind of look into the translation process rather than that kind of initial push in. But Norbert will talk about that just very slightly in a sec. So yeah, so basically we can have all kinds of different types of data within Gridly. So this is an example here of a very simple project that, that Norbert put together. So yeah, so if I zoom out of the way. So yeah, so this is kind of just shows a very kind of example here. Those of you that may have seen the Rovio webinar that we did previously, it's a similar kind of effect to that, where we're able to generate and push those screenshots directly from Unity into Gridly. So over here on the right hand side, I just want to show here that we've got, there's history and stuff and all that, as you would expect, but we have our API here. So what we'll find with Norbert in a second is that we have our API key, and then we have our view ID. Now the view ID is very important because that's where Unity will be pulling the text from and pushing the text to. So it's very important. So you could specifically have a very detailed view that you only use to then pull data from and to push data to. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this. So this is very, very kind of simple, not a lot going on here. And then I'll hand over to Norbert and then we can start developing this grid a little further. So I shall stop my share and then hand over to Norbert.
Thank you so much, Mike. Welcome, everyone. You can see the open game in Unity on my screen. After you download and install or add the package, the Gridly plugin into your Unity, you can find it inside of the tools, Gridly. And inside the Gridly, you can find the setup, setting, and the string editor. At the first place, we are going into the setup setting. This is the place where you can connect your Unity installation to the Gridly view. Into the first text box, you have to type in or copy and paste the API key you can find in the grid. And you have to modify or add a new view where you have to place the view ID. It can be found also at the same place where you have the API key. If you've used the Gridly plugin before, this is a new thing in the new release. This is a path on your computer where the Unity plugin will look for these screenshots. And that's all about the Gridly setup. Let's go into the languages. As you've seen in the grid we have in Gridly right now, we only have an English US language with its screenshot column. This is the source, and we already pushed the data into that grid. Right now, I will add a new language to the Unity project and the grid in Gridly as well. You can select here the column ID from which has been pulled from Gridly. So if I click on that, you can see that we have EAS screenshot and the ESES. It automatically select the correct one, but if you want to change, you can do that. For the screenshot column ID, we have to specify that which column should be used to push the screenshots. Right now, we don't have any column for the Spanish screenshots, so I will generate a new one with clicking on the generate column. Shortly, we will see on Mike's screen that the columns automatically created while we are working in Unity. Okay, so we have the Spanish and the Spanish screenshot. Let me give back the mic to Mike.
Sure. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, share that again. Okay, right, so we're back here now, so we can see that this is now updated here. There's been no smoke and mirrors whatsoever. It's not like a new grid or anything like that. This has been added to now. So we've now added these without actually kind of any manual step within the Gridly side of things. So this has now been generated here. So now we're at the point now we can now kind of send this up for translation. So what we would normally do is we would then create a branch of this. Now this can be done from a development side of things. So certainly if a developer wanted to work on a Christmas release or whatever that thing might be, you can certainly then create a new branch of that and then work on that branch in isolation, translate, then merge it back into the master, and then you can track changes and stuff. But for the sake of this, for this particular webinar, we'll forego that. And we'll just add some text in here. Now, the way that this is now associated through that push, this has now created a dependency between the Spanish and the English. So if I select dependency here, we've got this again automatically generated by that plugin. And then, of course, you can add further dependencies. So if, for example, you've got another value that you'd like to associate, another column you'd like to associate with something changing within Gridly, you can choose to set up a real kind of a network of different dependencies. And of course, what would happen here is if you then had a pivot language, for example, so you would then have one language dependent on another, and then all the other languages dependent on that middle language, that pivot language. So you can set all that up too. But so for this, we're going to leave it like this as it is now. So that's all great. So now we can start adding some text. So there's a number of different ways we can do this. So we can double click in here. If you've got translators you'd like them to work directly, they can add some text in here. Blah 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 blah. So that's all good here. You can, if you want to, you can right click on a string, and then it can open this extended view down here. And down here, you can then see what the source is for that particular string. You can then enter text here, and then you can also then work with translation memory, glossary, and any missing tag information within this environment as well. So that one's very much more suited for those that are working, actually kind of translating and editing within Gridly. You can also choose to push to memsource or memoq if you wanted to. So if I select that, I shan't push it this way, but just to show you. Push to memoq here, so you can then choose existing projects, etc. You can choose which languages you want to send, and at the moment this is currently set a new project. Then we've got English here, your target language. You can also choose to push up-to-date records and any other data featured in any other columns that may be within that grid as well. And so that can then be pushed to your memoq instance. So I'll get rid of that. Or indeed, you could just create a localization export, which is also tracked as well. So if any changes happen to the source text while this export is out for translation, when it comes back in, it will be, all those translations will be flagged as out of date. So again, the importance of that kind of agile, things are going out, things are coming back, things are being changed, and making sure that things don't go missing, which is obviously a nightmare. And again, here you can then choose if you want to include up to dates. You can then choose other data as well in the same way as the other push. But what I'm just going to do here is I'm just going to copy and paste some text in here. Okay, so that's just pasted the Spanish in here, and so now that's all in here as well. Now, what might then happen if somebody's translating directly in Gridly? They can then choose to actually set a question on a particular string. So, for example, this one here back. So to do that, I would just right click, and then I can add a ticket here. So if I add a ticket, I can say it's a basic one. You can also add LQA issues, which allows you to then kind of put where that LQA issue kind of where that lies. So you could potentially have, if it's formatting, software formatting, etc. You've got these different choices. But I'm just going to add a simple basic one, and so I'll just say verb or noun, and then I'll then add that. And then a ticket will then appear, a little icon appears in the corner here, verb or noun. You can then view that ticket, and then that view ticket can then be assigned to someone, etc. So it's all kind of there and ready to go. You can pop directly to that that particular string if you wanted to as well. So that query's gone in there. Now, what I've actually set up is a trigger. So that trigger here is then when a ticket's created or updated, it will then ping my Slack. And so it goes through to my Slack and it will then give me a message to then say, okay, well, there's a particular thing that's happened here that I want you to have a look at. Now, it could well be a case of you want to then you can send a webhook to whichever system you want, really. I mean, you could send something to Jira if you wanted to as well. So there's all that, that's all featured in there as well. So we can see here, this has now sent this ticket 4:15 here, which is 5:15 for some of you guys. And then it's a verbal noun here. So immediately you've got the record ID, etc. You've got all the information there. So obviously that makes sure that people kind of are notified when things are changing, which is absolutely vital, as you know, of course. So I've got the text in here. That's now ready to go. And of course, sorry, I should point out as well, if you then want to then select that ticket and then write a reply, which might be go away or something like that, then that's totally fine as well. And of course, then you can then mark it as being resolved. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand back to Norbert, and Norbert's going to take us through the very brief screenshot creation pass that happens, and then we'll also then generate the screenshots for the Spanish. So I'll stop my share now.
Thank you, Mike. The Unity plugin we updated and uploaded has an example screenshot generator scene, which goes through on all of the scenes you set in the scene builder and goes through all on the languages you defined inside of the setting of this scene. So right now we have the ENUS and the Spanish Spain. And when I click into play, it will go through on the scenes and changes the languages. But before we do that, we have to take the translations from Gridley. Inside of the string editor, you can see we have the same strings as you see in Gridley. When I click in the pool selected grid, it will download data from the grid we have, and the translations has been applied to the records. Okay, we are ready to generate the screenshots. Okay, it's done. And now we are ready to send the screenshots back to Gridley. To do that, in the string editor, you have to define in the push options what you would like to push back to Gridley. At the first place, we use the source text and screenshots. This is why you've seen only the English there. If you would like to send the target language screenshots as well, you have to go into the language screenshots and select the language, or click on the all target language screenshots if you would like to send all of them. And now I will select the Spanish and click on the push data. It will notify you about what you will do when the push data finished. And that's all. This is how pretty easy. Let me hand back the mic to Mike.
Thank you. So the particular use of that is then that allows you to then choose if there's just one particular language. So more often than not, you'll probably say, actually, I'd like to send them all or from a particular level or whatever, and you want to send every single language through for checking, because there may well have been a source text that you then kind of want to mirror. But yes, certainly you may well be kind of running a very specific Turkish pass or whatever it might be, in which case you just want to select, those particular languages, or maybe just the Turkish. So that's like a super useful thing there. Right. So without no further ado, we can see here we've got our ES screenshots here. So if I select that one, we can see that this is obviously, it's got three here because they all appear on this screenshot. Obviously, if they were on separate screenshots, it would then have 3 different screenshots, but these all look the same here. So I've got this one here, for example. Yes, that's the same, but the back one then appears on its own on this one here, like we saw. So yeah, so basically you can actually choose, and I'll come on to this in a minute. Probably a few of you going, what does that red thing mean? And I shall show you in a second. Right, so you can choose to make changes within Unity and then push those changes through from Unity into Gridley. And as a result, you can see here, these are now set as up to date, because as it currently stands, the dependency of this on the English means that it's now currently up to date because there's been no change to the English. Now, if a change happens in Unity and that's pushed into Gridley, then it will then change the text here and then flag any of the appropriate translations in all the different languages as being out of date. And then this will then change to a yellow, which I can show you now. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to show how we can change the text in Gridley, and that can also go to Unity, but it will also then mean that we're managing it in one place rather than changing stuff in Unity and then it pushing through. Both is absolutely fine, but we just thought we'd show you it here instead. So if I change settings to, or if I change play to play game up here, so you can see here, this is now flagged, this is being out of date. Now, what we can also see here as well is that we've got this, this error that's been found here. So this particular tag was introduced during my first translation pass, and it's naughty, it shouldn't be there. The way that it's found that is that we have tag settings as one of the features here. So this is okay, it's just you can choose which setting you'd like to actually employ for this detection. So if it's regex or if it's a custom tag, which you can set, but this is just like a simple kind of auto detect. So it will find the kind of usual suspects. So like this, for example, a %s. So it says here that the tag is not found in the source. Of course, it's not in the source. So what I'm now going to do, we can see it's in the screenshot as well, but we will then say, right, okay, we're going to remove that and then enter that. Now that's still currently up to date as it stands, and I'm going to change the I'm going to add some text to that. So again, so mirroring the, sending it for translation, pushing it to memo queue, whatever it might be, mem source, and then it's come back, and now these are now currently up to date now. So what I'll then do is then we can then ask Gabor to have a little go at updating those screenshots, if you could, please. And then that will just happen in the background. So check those tags. We've changed to Spanish. We're going to gen those screenshots, and then once we're done with these screenshots, lots of stuff's happening. Then once this is done, then we can see what it looks like in the project itself. Now, what I'd also like to point out is that there's loads of different types, data types that you could employ as well. So if I create a column here, in this particular column, I could say ES approved, for example, and then you can then choose if you want it to be a multiple line, if you want it to be a Boolean, which is probably more often than not going to be the case, but you can then choose if you want to kind of create any other files and place those in there as well. And of course, there's code formatting here too. Then you have other things that you can do within these columns. So you could set it as a reference. So you could have 2 grids speaking to each other and populating columns within another grid, or you could indeed have formulas, for example, like looking for maximum text limitations, or splitting one line into 2 lines so you can then push them to one signal, or whatever the platform might be. So there's lots of other functionality that can form part of these columns. So in this particular instance, I'm going to say Boolean, and then you can set a default value. I'll leave it as it is for now. So this has now created a Boolean column here. Now, the way that this current view works, it's pulling from the default view. If I wanted to, I could create a new view and call that view a Unity view. So we could then set Unity to be checking this one. So everyone could be working on strings and doing the translations, etc. But Unity will not take that string back until this ES approved has actually been checked. So then at that point there, then Unity can be set up to say, okay, I'm going to pull now, but I'm only going to pull that one string, for example. So again, again, a kind of additional kind of check. So you don't have to always be pulling all the strings all the time and doing a get strings. You can certainly just pull the ones that you particularly want, and they have been approved and checked, and everyone is happy with them. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to have a quick look at the, so what did we change here? We had play game, changed here, so that's now updated here as well. Then we've got hook up partida here, so we've changed this as well. And you can see here that this, even if I look at the relative one here, we can look, this one here has been changed as well, so that no longer has that bug. So again, so that kind of turnaround of data and turnaround of changes, can be dramatically sped up all the way through. So yeah, so that was the views I wanted to show. Now, these views, I should explain as well, are very important in terms of how you then collaborate and how you share that data, because you can create any kind of number of groups that you want, and associated to those groups are then the views that you assign to those groups. So for example, in this one here, I've got a Unity view, and I can then set that up to only be viewable by Unity, for example. Or I can have a lock manager view. And so that lock manager view, so if I add a lock manager view, so I had a lock manager view here. And so within that lock manager view, you can then choose what you want that lock manager to actually be able to change at any point. So you can then say, well, actually, the lock manager, I don't want them to be able to change. I want them to be able to see the English, but not to change. And the path, I don't want them to change that either. But I do want them to be able to see the English screenshot, but not change the screenshot. But they can then change and view and change the Spanish, and also this Boolean as well. And then you can have stuff like last modified by and last modified time over here as well, of course. So yes, you can. So this view then is then within the. So you would then create a group that would be the lock manager group, or this Spanish lock manager group, and you would then assign that view to that group, and then off they go. So they would only be able to see these. You can then also have not just a manage column. You can choose to remove columns if you want. So you can say, well, actually, I want to remove the record ID. So then that doesn't even appear within this view. But then what you can then do is you can then choose to only show particular strings as well. So you can then choose, I only want to show ES approved strings, and only if there's a checkbox here. So if I select that, and you'll see everything else drops out of here apart from this one string. So again, if I share the lock manager view, and it's all, actually it would make far more sense for that to be the lock manager view if that's a false in here. So that lock manager can then be reviewing the text. How does it look in this one here? That looks fabulous, bonk. And then they can start kind of checking these off and then approving them. So then they then go into the Unity process. So that's the views there as well. So if I now share, if I go back to Norbert, we can actually have a look at that actually within the project itself.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So right now we have the same data on both sides. So it's time to start the project on my computer to see how the strings looks inside of the game. You're seeing the English text during we created the screenshots, and here is the Spanish text. The setting button is working, and here we have the back button, which leads us back to the main menu. And this is how it looks. Thank you so much. If you have any question, please feel free to ask for us.
Cool, thank you very much. I'll just grab it off you a second, because there's a couple of things I mentioned before I just want to show off now. So if I just, yeah, so I mentioned before about the ability to overlay text, for example, which could be certainly be kind of like an additional part, and certainly we will run an actual a session on this at another point where we can go into a bit more detail. But just for now, if I share with you again here, so what we've got here is we've actually got a functionality where we've taken a source image like this, and we've actually placed the sneaky peeky, okay, that's fine. So if I then select this here, we'll see that that text is actually overlaid within the image. Now this is justified incorrectly, etc., but it's just purely to demonstrate that you can then have a screenshot, place some text over that screenshot. But the beauty of this is that you can then tie that to different languages as well. So you can run through that whole process of getting the translations, making sure the screenshots are up to date in each of the languages, and then you can then populate those within the screenshot. So if I've got let's change this. This is new. So that you'll see then that this disappears, and then what this is doing is that it's then using the Lambda functionality to then pull the data. Although I think that this database NS. Oh, I'm in the wrong blooming database. What an idiot! I went in your one, Norbert. But yes, this will update this screenshot here. It's not doing it right now because I wasn't intending to show this until this very moment. But yes, we will certainly run through that properly with it actually working as you'd expect in a different webinar. So we're going to go through this. We're going to go through other functionality we have, like the ability to push to one signal, or other similar platforms like that as well, which might make life a lot easier. And then eventually, of course, we will run an Unreal one as well, of course, as you would hope. But yes, like Norbert says, if you've got any questions, then please feel free to share them now, and we'll try to answer them. Right. Okay, no questions at the moment. Okay.
We have one in the chat.
I don't think we do, unless you can see what I can't see. Okay, well, I can volunteer some more info. So we have. So if you haven't tried out Gridly yet, then please feel free to touch base with us. But certainly you can you can sign up for the pro plan for a month, and that's free. And then what will happen at the end of that pro plan, it will then default back to the free plan, and you can carry on using that for as long as you fancy. But if you found it useful and you kind of need a beefier integration, then you may well want to kind of look towards the pro, signing up to the pro, or indeed the enterprise. But all the information is on our website, of course. Anything from Slava? You there? Come on, Olga, you must have something. But you know what? Maybe it's a case of somebody's created the setting where nobody's able to chat. Anyone thought of that? Maybe. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do is I think I've stopped sharing there. Yes, I have. Now I'm going to actually go to the right place. And if people want to drop out, then please, by all means, do. But I will show you from the correct database this screenshot overlay working. Okie dokie. Okay, not that one. Okay, got it here. So I will share my screen again very quickly. And if people are still here, then wonderful news. Okay, right. So here we have a different database, the one I should have actually been in. So again, we've got actually 3 images here for the different resolutions, different devices. So we'll have sneaky gameplay baby on this one here. Please work. So yeah, so what should happen is that these should then, yeah, there we go. That's now disappeared. What we've done here, and we don't condone machine translation, of course, totally up to you, but at the end of the day, but this is machine translated from the English into the Swedish, and it's also generating those screenshots as well. Of course, for just for a placeholder, just for kind of trying these things out, and by all means, then this is fine. Just to make sure, just so you can actually kind of look at what the text, if the text is kind of runs off the side, etc., you immediately have an idea of whether or not this is a problem or not. But yes, so for example, you've got sneaky gameplay baby over here, bonk. And then we've got that translated here. And so, yeah, so you can then run these operations, which allow you to kind of communicate on kind of multiple levels with multiple things, and then generate something which you can then use a trigger for example, to then run an export. You can generate these images, you can run an export to then place those images somewhere where you would desire to have those placed. So we have that trigger one there. Then we have stuff like, oh, actually, I don't know if I've shared my audio, share sound. Yeah. So we have another one here where we can then show you another one of these types of processes where we have TTX, for example. So TTX is nice weather we're having on the fly testing, right? Okay.
Nice weather we're having on the fly testing.
Okay, and that's currently using eSpeak. So Norbert, can I just check? Can you hear that?
Yes, yeah, we can hear that.
Okay, just making sure. So yeah, so then we have it hooked up to Poly. So again, using the Lambda functionality, we're then sending a trigger. So whenever this text changes, it's then telling these two over here to also change.
Nice weather we're having on the fly testing.
Right, so if we there now changes to nice weather for April, and you'll see that these again disappear and then they're repopulated again. So if we choose Poly again.
Nice weather for April.
So there we go. So there's another functionality there. But again, so I think we'll do specific ones on Lambda functionality at another point. I shall go back to the chat again. And if there aren't any questions, oh, hello. Oh, everything was clear. Thank you very much. So Matthew says, everything was clear. Thanks. Well, cheers, Matthew. Alexandra is saying, will there be more cat tool integrations like Trados or SmartCat? There's certainly the potential to. I think we chose those two to kick things off with, but it's just a case of when, if people, mention these to us, we look at the kind of popularity, etc., and then we'll then make a call. Make a call on whether or not these are things that we're able to devote time to. But certainly, it makes a lot of sense to support other cat tools.
We have another question from Vaslav. The question is about the cost and where they can find the Unity plugin. The plugin itself is free and free to change. So it is you can change the code by yourself, and you can find it in the Unity store and in our GitHub page.
And yes, do feel free to pop along to the GitHub and comment and adapt. And yeah, that's all very much appreciated. And even, if there's feedback on the Unity integration itself, then, obviously we'd like to know about it. Because certainly if we can improve it even further, then that'd be great. Anybody else for any more? Okay. Okay, so LQA process. Okay, if I just stop sharing for a second, because I just need to pop out of this into somewhere else. Okay, so LQA process, right. So as it currently stands, we're actually planning to release over this weekend a auto QA functionality. Let me share my screen. Let me just see. Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is the database we were in before. So yes, so we've got, so if I go to my Unity grid again over here, and I've got my lock manager view here still, so I'm just going to change that back to default so we can get a few more shots up here. Right, so we are releasing an auto QA feature this weekend, so you should be able to try that out after this weekend. So within this auto QA, you're then able to then select your source language, and then you're able to then select the target languages that are currently dependent. Now, these languages will not appear in here unless you have set them as a dependency up here. And that applies to a lot of functionality as well, because obviously it's very much about relationships between things. And if something suddenly is out of date, we need everything to know that it's out of date. So this at the moment is just the Spanish here, and then you would run the auto QA here. Then once that runs through the pass, you'll then be able to see those. So if you have this selected, auto QA, it will then show you here the different types of errors, and then you can then choose which you want to see. If it's numerals, etc., you can choose to kind of deselect things from here, etc. So you can then choose that, and then you'll have statistics here that will then be set up here. Now on the LQA methodology itself, you're actually able to choose your own methodology. So for example, I chose this one here, which was verbal noun. It's just a basic ticket. But if you have the LQA integration selected here, you're actually able to then choose a methodology itself that you'd like to employ. So as we saw before, if I right click on this one, for example, I can then add a ticket here. And then I can choose an LQA issue here, and somebody can say, this is bad, or whatever. And then they can then choose priority, then the category, if it's language formatting, etc. So let's just go for that. And then a subcategory here. Now, this is all based off of this particular methodology. And then, of course, there's severity, major, blah, blah. And then we can then add that. So once that's added, we've got these choices here to denote what type of issue it is. And then we can also, of course, we can click on the ticket, let's view the ticket. And again, like before, we can then kind of say, who is this? We can then assign it to someone, or indeed change the priority if we want to as well. And you can also, if you put stuff like, at somebody, then obviously then that will then go to that person via email as well, and also appear in their notifications for their particular user instance. But if I come out of here, and actually go to over here, we've got our company's localization settings here. So here's where you'll be able to then kind of deal with all of this type of stuff. So again, do sign up for Gridly and you can check all this out yourself. But you've got stuff like glossary management here. You've got translation memory, custom tags. As I mentioned before, with that tag finding ability, you can then define create a custom tag list here. So if there are specific things that you'd like to make sure you keep an eye out for. And then down here is the LQA models that we were talking about before. So this is the current LQA model, which is Lisa. And then we have these two you can also choose from. So if we select, you can choose to then add it to a particular project. And it gives you a little bit of spec on, this is how it works, etc. But what we're currently in the process of putting together is actually the ability to create your own if you want to as well. So yes, so hopefully that answers your question. Let's go back to chat again. All right, any other questions? Okie dokie. If there are, shall we call it a day and get down the pub, or whatever people fancy? Okay, well, I think that we should probably just leave it there then, unless there's any other questions. If there are any questions, please do feel free to reach out. Let me just go back to my share again, and I'll put those details up on the screen. Thank you for your time. And his contacts down here. So we've got sales at Gridly, team at Gridly, and then our website here as well. So yes, hopefully you found this useful. And obviously, please do, kind of keep in touch so that we can let you know when other webinars come along, which will hopefully be just as useful, if not more, than this one. So thank you very much for your time. And we shall stick a pin in it right now. Cheers, Norbert.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.